you signed pre-COVID-19. It may have been different at the post.
Yeah.
Hi, welcome to Take Pause During the Great Pause. We have three great experts with us today to speak about what you should do now and how do you get there. My name is Allison Forche, and I am a relationship manager with Gerber LLC. We are a business consulting firm located in downtown Columbus. Housekeeping, you should have received an attachment with your Zoom link, and you can follow along if you click on that attachment with the agenda that we will be using for our conversation today. And then you may also use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and feel free to type any questions that you have during the webinar, and we will answer your questions at the end of the discussion. So without further ado, Jim?
Thank you. I'm Jim Bolts. I'm an accountant here in Columbus. I have 36 years experience working primarily with dentists. Belong to a group called the Academy of Dental CPAs. I think we represent 8,000 dentists throughout the country, and I want to thank Gerber for having us.
Great. Thank you, Allison. My name is Cheryl Devore. I'm a managing partner with Thomas Law Group, which is located in Dublin, Ohio, which is part of Columbus, and we've been there for over 30 years. We assist clients with both business and personal needs. Our practice at the firm includes business acquisitions, general advisement for our corporate clients, commercial real estate, employee matters, estate and business succession planning, and also the administration of probate and trust estates and domestic relations. We have been very fortunate to represent a large number of professional practice owners over the year, including dentists, physicians, and veterinarians. We also are fortunate to serve as a counsel for a firm in Worthington, Haynes, Kessler, Myers, and Postalapis.
Hi, I'm Randy Gerber. Thank you for joining us today. Gerber LLC is a professional service firm that exclusively advises first-generation entrepreneurs. And while we cover a range of topics from succession and wealth management and operations, it really is rooted in how to grow your company with purpose. And one of our experiences is that so many entrepreneurs know they need to grow or die, but they don't understand what rate of growth they should consider. We help them understand that by helping them understand their life goals as they're married, as a couple, and how to grow the business along the idea of achieving our life goals. So today, in this weird world we live in, we wanted to talk about what to do now. And I think the three key points that we want to keep in mind that overshadow everything is that first and foremost, that be the solution to the new normal, not the victim. You know, we're starting to see a lot of companies go out of business. We're going to see more companies go out of business. And I think that this is one of these times as a business owner, and definitely as a dentist, you're a business owner. I know that we have about 15 of our clients are dentists or in the dental industry. You're going to have to push hard and be a great business owner and really identify, you know, who are you serving, how are you serving them more than ever at a very root level. And this is a fantastic opportunity to be strategic. People are patient. There's lots of forgiveness out there. Certainly if you're the PPP, hopefully you have lots of forgiveness. But as a generalization, people are patient. And so this is a time for you to really be strategic about how you grow from here. The first thing, again, let's kick this off, is that I do believe this is a great time to revisit, why are you in business? What are you trying to accomplish in life? Who are you trying to serve? How are you trying to serve them? And this is a great time to reset, you know, how do you grow your business with purpose? And, you know, should you expand geographically? Is telemedicine part of your future? And, you know, how are you pricing your services and how to go from there?
I think Randy makes a great point. And the purpose to me is really important in this topic. This is a great time to kind of refocus. And, when Randy introduced himself, he talked about how they help you with life goals. To me, that's kind of your why. And if you don't have that, and I know for 20 years I didn't. I got up, went to work, and figured that was good enough. But without the purpose, and this is a perfect time, and I think probably, at least in my career, I always said dentists made it in spite of themselves. You didn't have a third-party payer. You didn't have a pandemic. And I think those things are big enough now that if you don't have purpose to your moves, I think you're in trouble.
And as a part of this, I think that your customers, your clients expect some change. They're getting accustomed to change in their service providers across the board, and so it's something to think about. And one of the Jim, talk to me a little bit about what you think, because one of the things that I noticed that if you go back to the 2008 debt crisis, which was a debt crisis for individuals and a debt crisis for businesses. One of the reactions to that, for every action, there's a reaction. After that, we saw a lot of companies and individuals reduce the amount of their debt, and that's proven to be really helpful right now in this pandemic. But one of the things that I've noticed is that this whole issue really exposed those folks that don't have much cash. And when you think about it, we had this fantastic 10-year economic environment where lots of businesses in different sectors all did well. People made more money along the way, but why didn't they add cash to their balance sheets? And so as a part of that, thinking about should people think about changing the prices of their services now to really be more thoughtful about adding cash not only to their business balance sheet but their personal balance sheet as well?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think historically most small businesses have lived day to day, paycheck to paycheck. They tend to go to work and they develop a lifestyle, and without any thought, I think, towards how much cash and such. Again, there are a lot of people that save the cash. People that have the money right now, I think, are in great shape.
Yep.
This is a tough time, and it's difficult, but they're fine. The pricing historically in dentistry, I think, like accounting, like anybody, they have printouts and they look at prices for things. While that, to me, I think that's helpful and maybe something you look at, but I tend to believe that you should price your product and your service for what it is you're doing and what you want the outcome to be. And while all practitioners are different, it's kind of amazing, and at least in dentistry, the pricing is pretty much the same across the board, which doesn't make sense.
Right. Right. I know in our own model, we back in 2005 or 6, we changed our whole pricing model to be very unusual in that we put a flat minimum fee in, and people thought I was crazy, including most of my staff. But as it's turned out, that's what's helped us grow our business to where we are. And I think that there could be some outside the box thinking around pricing. And I don't know if it could be subscription services or something like that, or some more telemedicine of some sort. But the reason why I think it's so important is that you got to think about cash flow first versus competition first, right? And think about cash flow before just revenue, because it's one of the things that I go back to with our experience is so many entrepreneurs were chasing revenue with very little consideration for what it was doing to your balance sheet, right? They're stuck in the income statement. So, in our experience with our clients, that we help them develop tools to be very predictive of their cash flow going forward. So it's not just their revenue, it's also the expense side of it. I mean, what do you think about that in terms of the opportunities to reset today with the expense side of the equation? Are there any?
I think there are. I mean, the big complaint right now is the PPE cost. And, you you talk to some people and they are charging a surcharge for that cost, and you talk to others and they're not. I think there's not a lot of thought that goes into it. And again, there is. I would tell you the expense structure amongst dentists, at least in my career and with my clients, hasn't changed a whole lot. Again, I would tell you 75% of them have no purpose to that expenditure. So could they change? Yeah, I think they could. I think it's a great opportunity. I just think historically they haven't done that. They haven't looked at that factor because they had too much money.
Right. You know, along those same lines, and making fun of myself, which is really easy to do. When the tax laws changed around lack of deduction for entertainment, I was furious because that's what I did. And then when I started really examining the return on investment of those entertainment dollars, I realized it was all ego. I wasn't getting a return on investment. I got a return on my feelings, but not a return on investment with respect to really driving revenue and adding money to the balance sheet. And so it was a natural catalyst that forced me to think differently. And go back to this pandemic, even though this is not explicitly looking at your revenue and your expense side of your equation, but it is an excuse because people, again, I think are pretty forgiving and they're patient and they're willing to change. And along these lines, for both of you guys, in terms of your brand and the new normal, I'm just thinking about the personal protection equipment that those clients, those dentists that are charging for it and those that are not, is that reflective in the brand? Is that about would I want to, as a consumer, be charged for it because I want to make sure my dentist is financially viable and safe? I think so. I haven't been a dentist yet, need to. But I wonder, is it part of your brand and the new normal that you can redefine yourself?
I think it's how you disclose it more than anything. I think it's important, and again, I'm somewhat biased. I work with dentists, but I would tell you, it's my understanding of all the things I've seen. Most dental practices have been historically better and clean. Mm-hmm. It's the best place you can be. Mm-hmm. I think the dentist and the patient kind of took that for granted. Nobody ever discussed it or explained it. And when you talk across the board to dentists, with the exception of a few things, they're pretty much doing the same thing they were doing. I think the key is to let people know because people are scared. And I think if you let them know what you're doing to protect them and to make them safe, I think you have a better chance, and I think people will be much more forgiving of paying more.
If I could interject for just a minute on that point, I totally agree with what both of you were saying, and I think that it does potentially reflect on what brand, that you're trying to establish for the patient. And I harken back to all this really changed for dentists back with HIV. And that's when the CDC came out with guidelines that really changed dentistry forever. And they have been doing things far and above what other healthcare practitioners do, except if they're in the surgical suite. And so they're used to this. I think this is a great time for them to keep educating their patients about that this isn't like a new day for them. There are some new things they're doing. They have heightened it, but I think that it's a perfect opportunity. And then to Jim's point about disclosing, it's come to my attention recently that not only I knew that doctors, some were charging, some were not, they really do need to disclose it to the patient ahead of time, because now I'm hearing that the Attorney General's office is getting complaints about, and the issue is not disclosing the cost ahead of time to the patient. So
and if they're on PPO plans, they have to be careful because they have a contract with the insurance company.
Correct.
And
sometimes they aren't allowed to bill outside.
Got it.
Right.
So you really have to be aware of that.
Cheryl, is there a limit to what you can disclose? And I'm just wondering, advanced cleaning services now too, would that be part of? So personal protection equipment is one thing, right? But just the extra costs for a different type of cleaning or more thorough cleaning, do you think that's part of the disclosure, or is that something that's separate or not relevant?
I think, I don't know that I have a straight answer for you, Randy, but what I would say is that as if I was putting myself in the patient's shoes, knowing that they're doing extra things to protect me immediately, like they have to, a different mask or, the gowns that they're wearing, some of them are wearing now and all that. I think I'd be pretty accepting of that as a patient. That you tell me ahead there's going to be an additional charge because of this. It may be under insurance, it may not be. That's still kind of debatable right now. I would think that I would feel probably a general cleaning is, even though it's heightened, would really be the responsibility of the doctor.
Yeah.
I mean, that would just be, and that's not coming from a legal perspective.
Yeah.
It's coming from more of a personal perspective and what I would feel comfortable defending if a client came to me about this.
Yeah, one of the things that I've noticed along these lines in terms of what you're saying is the value of the dentist to keep the place super clean. That part of their overall mission. And one of the things that this pandemic did, and not just for dentists but across the board for entrepreneurs, really exposed the warts in the business, exposed the warts in some of the people, and one of the things that we witnessed very firsthand was that those clients that had really strong, defined, well-articulated values did much better than those that didn't. And I think this is a great time. If you haven't done it already, I think it's a great time to revisit your values and make sure that they're still the right ones. And if they're not, I think, again, in the world of change that we live in today, to redo them. And, one of the things that I have a really important question that I know from talking to a lot of our clients that they're struggling with some of their folks not wanting to come back to work. Mm-hmm. And our belief with our values that we have, and we advise this for our clients, is that your value should be strong enough that you hire people and fire to that. So somebody, and our first value is be present, be positive. If they can't be positive here, that they need to go, right? And so I'm just wondering, in your opinion, because I know we're going to experience people who won't come back to work. And do you fire them at this point in time, or do you accommodate them, or do you have an opinion?
I definitely have an opinion, if you can imagine that I do. And if this kind of is going to play directly into what we're going to talk about with rethinking your team. But I can certainly address that. We've had so many clients that have experienced that. And actually, it's been very disappointing to many of them.
Sure.
That they didn't anticipate the responses that they were getting. And the concerns about returning range from maybe some really genuine concerns about health that could be documented from a physician, and to, I want to stay on unemployment because I'm doing better there than I would be doing if I was working for you. And so we had to navigate those things. And what I will say, and I'll get into a little bit more in a moment, is that this gave them an opportunity to do exactly what you were saying, is to maybe not bring them back if they don't meet their core values, depending on how the exit occurred. So there's some legal things about, how did they actually separate?
Got it. One of the dynamics I think that's happened too is that the whole notion of segmentation has become more important. And we talk about this all the time with our clients, that not every one of your clients and customers are the same. You shouldn't treat them the same. And in some respects, the employees may be in the same boat. And I know for us, and I think for everybody right now, because the child care situation isn't solved yet in Ohio, and we have to treat our clients or our employees that have children differently than everybody else. And the thing that I really, and I think it's an opportunity, is when you think about segmentation, is identifying who your ideal customer is. Who is that person? And there's all sorts of ways to look at it from the standpoint of frequency of services, the amount of family members, geographic considerations, how they pay, and can you reposition your practice to reflect attracting more of those ideal clients? Because we all have those clients who don't fit, aren't perfect for us, but for some reason we take them, and they just are very disruptive to our businesses. And again, I just thinking about our core values and thinking about the change of acceptance of change right now, probably is a great time to really identify who are our best clients, who are our second best clients, and attach services to those folks in a segmented fashion. So, let's talk a little bit about who and what in the team, Cheryl.
Thanks, Randy. And really, working right off what you've just been talking about, it's a perfect opportunity to talk about who our team should be. So we entered this pandemic, and the dentists had to make very quick decisions to close. And I mean, I can think back to, in Ohio, March 16th was a classic day that most dentists were making that decision. And so it was a decision that was made usually in consulting their professionals. And there were decisions not the same for everyone. So I got that question a lot. What should I do? Well, let's look at what you've got going on right now. Let's look at your practice and determine what's best. And so in our case, we advised a lot of clients to lay off. So lay off officially in Ohio, lay off is a termination. So that severed and separated the employee from the employer. The reason we did this, and really two main reasons. One was to really create a dynamic where on the rehire, whenever that was, there would be more opportunity and there would be more ability for the dentist to control the rehire. That was one. The second one, to be quite blunt about it, was the Families First Act was going into effect, the FFCRA, on April 1st, right shortly on the heels of this closure. And we didn't know when our clients were going to be able to reopen. We didn't know how long they were going to be closed. And we felt that we needed to get them in a position of not having to comply with that law right away. Because we didn't know how the law was even going to be interpreted. There were so many unknowns about that. We didn't have final guidance on it at the time at all. So that was it. There were decisions made. There were some decisions that were made for the dentists. That closure was one thing, but then to bringing the team back. So now they get the word to reopen. And everybody's excited, but not everybody's excited.
Right.
Some team members aren't excited at all about this. Some team members felt that it was too soon, that this was not a good time for the dentist to be opening. This was disheartening to a lot of our clients when long-term employees said, I don't really want to come back now. And so we had to, again, navigate that. So we had to look at, okay, were they laid off and were they separated? And if, in fact, they were separated, we then, again, this is, what we said to our clients with reviewing of their information. I should have probably thrown my disclaimer in. This isn't legal advice for the general group that might be watching or listening. This is what we would advise after carefully looking at what the client had going on with contracts and whatnot. And so they, some self-selected not to come back. And we said to the dentist, that's okay. If that's what they want to do, that's what they want to do. Now overlay this with the PPP. So then about this time, the PPP's rolling out. People are getting their monies. Some got that a lot sooner than others. And then we had to navigate that with the tax advisor. So Jim and I were having a lot of conversations with mutual clients about, okay, we're making decisions. Maybe we're not going to bring everybody back up to full FTE. Now that may have changed now with some of the guidance, but at the time, we thought that's what we had to do to get this forgiveness. So some clients were saying, I'm not going to worry so much about forgiveness. I want to make the right decisions for the business. And if I've got team members that don't want to come back and can't give me a definitive time when they can come back that meets what I need, then we're probably going to consider that a non-acceptance of the offer. So offers were being made, and we encouraged clients to make formal offers with offer letters. They were being made, and then they were there were employees coming back and saying, I either don't accept the offer or I want the offer and I want to come back, but not on your time frame. I want to come back on another time frame. And they may have had some legitimate reasons for that. But again, if they were starting from a point of separation and termination, then we felt more comfortable in saying, well, Doc, you can make some decisions about whether or not you really want to bring all of them back. And in that, we had to be careful that we were not discriminating.
Sure.
That we were treating people equally. In other words, they all got offers to get their job back, and if they self-selected not to return at the required time, then we moved on.
So I have a bunch of questions that go with this.
Yeah, well, there are a lot, I know.
Are you seeing those offers at the same pay rate they separated service? Are there any not higher or lower at all? It's the same compensation and same.
You can't pay less than 75% of what they were making.
No, not about forgiveness. I'm talking about just in general. So
In general, to Cheryl's point, I think the smartest way to do it was what's best for the business. Understandably so, there were some people that were and had to be because of cash flow
Right.
and concerned about the forgiveness.
Sure.
They never would have done it if they can't get it forgiven.
Correct.
But most of the people I've seen, at least in my experience, I know Cheryl, it's pretty much been the same. They're making.
It has. The only thing that was a little cautionary at the shutdown period was that some people were on salaries. And, we did suggest that they move those people to hourly rates immediately. And then, but I think most of them have brought them back up. Now, what probably should address, I think where you're going, Randy, is there was an immediate need for staff, right, to get operations back up.
Right.
So the ones that were going to step up and do it and be there, I think my experience has been they were paid exactly as they were paid before. There's going to have to be a longer term plan that, because if they didn't hire everyone back and they hired just these certain people that they needed to for the emergent need that they have some time to now reflect on what do positions look like from here and what do I pay? We all know that as time goes on, sometimes staff are rewarded when they shouldn't be.
Right.
And their pay rates get out of sync with really what the cash flow should be for that practice.
And specifically, I think that's exactly what the last 10 years have done in this economy. That you every day, everywhere you went, you heard about rising revenues and rising profits and eventually rising compensation. I think there's a lot of pressure across all industries, including dentistry, to keep paying people more just because.
Right.
And so that's really where I'm going with this question. Is that is this? So what I'm hearing you say is people, that based on their urgency, really the folks that came back first were getting the same offers before, but now they can probably be a little more patient and make better decisions really for the business and how to pay people and what to pay.
I think it's going to be an employer's market.
Yeah.
I think this has caused enough chaos that there's going to be a lot of people that you're going to be able to pick and choose from.
Which leads me to another really important question, and well, I know neither of you are dentists, nor am I, or even played one on TV. The demand. Do you think the demand is going to be the same eventually, or does it change, or is there any reason to be concerned about that?
Do you mean speaking the demand for services?
Uh-huh.
I think we try to be encouraged about this, and I think that the organized dentistry is putting out information about how long they think. I think Jim, I saw 18 to 24 months to recover is what they were projecting. Jim and I have had this conversation many times already, thinking that some of our clients, some of their practices are going to recover very quickly, we think. And then others may take a little bit longer, and that may have to do with the services they provide, or were providing before and are providing now, and their cash on hand and how they manage the practice and the decisions they've already made.
I think so. I think it's cash. I think you talked about core values and the reputation. A lot of those reputations were made prior to this. And a lot of the problems, that, in my opinion, that exist aren't COVID related.
Got it.
They were there.
Right.
And those people, I think, like any industry, there's going to be some that struggle or fail.
Right.
But the ones that I think treat people right, treat their employees right, have a rhyme and reason to what it is they do, are going to be fine.
And I guess along those lines, back to the segmentation piece I was talking about, and the idea maybe a slower start's a better start, because you bring back your best people first, and serve your best customers first, your best clients first, best patients first, and then as you see how things unfold, be super picky about who you bring back as an employee, and make sure that you get the compensation structure correct. And there's nothing wrong with having your supply meet the demand,
Right.
and so right now you have the ability to control the supply piece of it, and if we expect the demand piece to be a little lower, it can be thoughtful and therefore be profitable and cash flow. as you go through the whole thing. So it's a really, but I think what we're all saying is that it shouldn't be an accidental decision. This is a decision you should
Correct.
make that you can control. You can control this to something. I mean, you can be reactive to the demand piece, but think through the supply piece and try to be thoughtful around this being profitable and provide cash flow and really only serving the best patients you want to serve.
And I think that, Randy, that flows right into, who's your A team?
Right.
And how do you decide that A team? And if you were slower on the start and thoughtful about it, you would have brought your most A team players back first, providing they were willing to come back. And I think that's part of being an A team member, that they probably were. And you bring them back, and you would slowly then start to re-examine. Your practice may look different today than it did pre-pandemic, and your goals may have changed. We heard, there's definitely some dentists out there that are at a point in their career that this was if I could shut down tomorrow and not come back, I might do it, because I don't really want to have to go through all this again. And so there is some of that going on. Now, that wasn't the majority of our clients, but some said things like that, sometimes with a wink and a laugh, but we don't know how serious. Or a tear. So I think that, then thinking about the A team, what should those people look like? And maybe that looks different than it used to. You used to really reward seniority, right? So just automatic raises. The longer you were there, the more money you made, and not with much thought to performance and performance evaluation and structuring, the compensation model around that about performance. With some clients, they had staff who had been cross-trained. And so those were very, very desirable staff to bring back because they could handle a couple of positions in one time. We actually had some clients who were thinking about doing some teleworking, allowing that during this time to keep good people able to work when maybe they had a child care problem or whatever, and they couldn't get back in the office. And they actually came up with some creative ways to do that when they had to think about it. Where before the pandemic, if you had mentioned teleworking, the immediate response you would have got, there's no teleworking in a dental office. That can't be done. So it's really.
But today is a different story. I mean,
today's a different story.
It has to be.
Yes, it really does. And it's you mentioned earlier, thinking outside the box, Randy. We have to do that. We have to create different kinds of positions that people want to be in, that they want to come to, and with different compensation structures and reward systems, and flexibility. So I think we do have to look more about being a little bit more progressive in that way. Right now, some offices are working on split shifts for COVID to protect the staff, to keep the office going.
Got it.
But also to extend hours. So having split shifts, so different people come in on different times, that they can have a different model for what their work week looks like. So it's a protection and maybe an ability to have the office offer more, in time availability. I think all these things should be thought about and should be applied. And you said early on, don't be the victim. This is the chance to control and get a team around you that you want, and that will help you become the practice that you want to be if you're not already there, or regain the practice that you were that you still want to be.
Something you said that really caught my attention that kind of curious, Jim. This is an unfair question because I didn't give you a chance to research it in advance, but the cross-training piece seems really interesting to me. That person or those people that are cross-trained are probably more valuable. And I wonder, do you have insight to practices that a higher majority of their people were cross-trained pre-COVID-19? And is there evidence that those practices were more efficient, more profitable?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have definitive data available. I would tell you the cross-trained when I think of cross-trained, I think of smaller, more lean and mean practices. The bigger the practice, I tend to see more specialization, not as much cross-training. And I would tell you, I have not really seen a difference in a pretty short period of time, whether people are cross-trained or not. The difference honestly, Randy, is they put thought into what it is they're doing. I talked to somebody yesterday, and he just doesn't know. And he's afraid because he doesn't know, so he doesn't make any decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And all the small businesses, and myself, my grandparents are Sicilian, so I lose my temper a lot. I say things, my wife gets mad at me. You know, most of their decisions are emotional, and they're really not data driven. This is what's best for the business. And again, we have short memories. That's a good thing, but it's a bad thing.
Sure.
Because we have talked to a lot of people that have said, you know what, I really liked a lot of things about this. You know, I get to spend time with my family and this and that. And when I go back, it's going to be that way. And they're back to the same old thing.
Right.
So I think it's more really proud and purpose to what it is they're doing.
Yeah. You know, we heard not only spending time with family, but there's this less cluster in your life, right? Less clutter, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you know, the telemedicine thing is a really big deal, I think, because one of my good friends is a doc in a very, very large GI practice, and you know, they said the same thing, that they avoided telemedicine, you know, that was worthless, and they're forced into it and realized that the revenues were substantially better than they expected. And you know, all of us, the whole remote telecommuting opportunity is huge. And I do think, you know, back to, not to circle back to this, but back to life goals. What are you trying to accomplish in life? I know we don't want more clutter in our life. We want less, right? We want more peace,
Absolutely.
not less. And so it's a great time to reset and rethink, you know, what do you want? And what does that practice look like? And embrace, you know, some of these changes, these opportunities that can change today. Question for you, Cheryl, that it's not just for dentists, but it's general business. You know, we're seeing more and more of a push for entrepreneurs to be indemnified around any COVID-19 related matters. You know, so quote unquote, you know, forcing people back to work, and then all of a sudden somebody in the workplace is diagnosed to have it. And so this is all moved. We talked about this earlier, how quickly so many of these things have moved. And as a generalization, I think the government's moved really, whether you like how they moved or not, they moved pretty quickly in a lot of things, you know. And one of the areas that I suspect is going to come that hasn't been addressed yet, I haven't really even heard any serious conversations, is the indemnification piece. And do you think there'll be some indemnification for employers or dentists around, you know, so somebody, you force people to come back, and all of a sudden, as an example, there's a person with COVID-19 in the workplace? Or do you think that's going to be a messy gray area for a while?
Well, I think it's going to be messy for sure. I think most lawyers who have been navigating this landscape during all of this feel they are definitely they're going to be lawsuits of all kinds.
Sure.
From employees. When you make mass decisions like we've had to make with employees, we know that that's going to generate some sort of claims coming forward. We don't know what they'll all be, and we'll just have to manage them the best we can. To your point, this was a conversation we were having both about patients and about employees as people were reopening. And I guess the starting point is going to be, it's going to be very difficult to ever prove that someone got COVID from a certain place.
Oh.
That's going to be one thing. But with that said, that doesn't mean that somebody's not going to try to file a claim about this. I know, let's talk about the staff piece first, because I think that's where you were headed, right? That's why so a couple of things. If staff were really too afraid to come back, we told employers not to force them to come back. You know, you can't force them, and that's their choice. They're not going to do it. That didn't mean you had to keep their position open for them, but that's a decision they're making. They're not comfortable. We have advised clients that, you have an obligation to the employees to do things that are being required of you on safe reopening in Ohio. So if we're in Ohio, we're talking about the Ohio Department of Health has put safe reopening up. They've got guidelines from the Department of Labor, OSHA guidelines. They've got guidelines from the CDC. And then the ADA had their own guidelines from the American Dental Association. So if dentists are doing those things, and to protect their staff and their patients, and they're responding quickly if someone has symptoms, reports an illness, that they have a policy in place for that that's in line with those guidelines. So, we've been very much in agreement of doing all the things of taking temperatures, making sure that people are following all the protocols, and we're getting staff to sign off on the fact that they acknowledge the protocol that's being put in place, the reason for it, and they're going to follow it. So that's number one, that the staff have to buy into that and follow the protocol. Then the next thing is the employer responding. So really, like any cause of action an employee might try to make, if the employer becomes aware of something, how are they responding? And so we just recently had our first client that reported that they actually had now a staff member who got symptoms of COVID and was going to get tested. So he did the right thing. My partner happened to be the one advising that client. And so Chad, went through and looked at, again, what's the most important thing we need to be looking at. We looked at those guidelines. Recommendations were made that, yes, send the person home right away. Get as soon as they report that, if they were in the office and then had symptoms, get them out of the office immediately. Get them to go get a test. Then they need with their doctor. That staff member needs to stay away from the office for the requisite period of time, whether it's going to be, if they had COVID, I think it's going to be at least a 2-week window. If they didn't, if they just had symptoms, it's going to be maybe a shorter period of time, but fevers have to dissipate without medication being given and that sort of thing. So then there is a little bit of a navigation with the other staff because they're going to know somebody's gone, and we have HIPAA issues that we don't want to be disclosing a lot of health information, but enough to make the staff realize that we've handled it, and we've addressed the issue. So I think if the dentists if they get that plan in place and they're proactive like that, it may not keep a claim from coming, but it certainly is going to give them the defense that they need to respond to the claim. And the same thing with patients. One of the things we got asked was, should all the patients sign waivers and releases?
Sure, yeah.
When they come in. We really were not pro that. From an employee standpoint, we didn't think it would be defensible.
Right.
Okay, because it's your obligation as the employer to make a safe work environment and do all that, right? From a patient standpoint, we really didn't like it. We felt that the patient consenting to have treatment during the pandemic is what you want. So, and I actually saw some malpractice carriers, and my partner and I both did. We saw forms coming around that the malpractice carriers were providing to the docs, but not requiring them to use them, but saying they might want to consider it. And it basically was an acknowledgement that they were electing to have treatment during a pandemic. They were aware of the risks, and that they also, some of them would attach those questions that the docs were supposed to be asking about the travel and the fever and all of those things. And so, if the malpractice carrier was suggesting it to a particular client, we said probably ought to think about using it. We might have tweaked it a little bit, and we don't know that that's going to impact their coverage. One carrier absolutely said it would not impact the coverage that they had. It's not a requirement. It was just maybe a good practice that they might want to think about. Did that address what you?
Yeah. It's interesting, and medicine and dentistry is one business, and I know I was on a call with John Houston on Monday afternoon, and just the topics coming up, and it's super tricky.
Very.
And I do tend to believe you create a safe and transparent work environment and make those decisions as you know information, you're probably in pretty good shape.
And transparency is a very important piece of that,
right.
that they know what's going on and what you're doing and why.
Right.
I mean, that's been for malpractice. People sometimes, when they get a complaint from a patient, they just kind of ignore it. And that's usually when it's bad.
That's right.
And so what you want to do is you want to address it. As soon as it comes up, address it.
So, Jim, you, I think, certainly both of you guys have lots of clients in this space, and I'm curious, how many of your doctors had a active continuity plan in place that they actually executed? And I might even throw that final part in here and worked through this whole process.
Jim, you want to go first?
For the pandemic,
Yeah.
0. For any emergency, I would say less than 5%.
And those that did have it, was the continuity plan they had in place, was it easily transferable to a pandemic, or was it just off base?
No, I think it was easily transferable. It was a starting point. A lot of people, and those that didn't, there was a segment that had implemented from the first day, March 16th, when they weren't allowed to go in, they started thinking about what do we need to do. And then there's in my opinion, there's probably a larger segment that have just put their heads in the sand and said, this stinks.
Right.
And then when, on Monday, the governor said you can open up on Friday, they were like, what do we do?
Yeah.
What do we do?
This is interesting because there's some very good connections to 2008 when we had our financial crisis. The government didn't have a playbook for it, right? And so it took a long time to develop a playbook on how to handle it. And basically, the decision in 2008 they made was make sure the banks are strong and flood the markets with money, so there's liquidity. And so when the pandemic happened, there wasn't much debate. That's exactly what they did. They made sure the banks were strong and flooded the money with markets. So our country is developing kind of a continuity plan for big crises. And I think about our crises. I think that, and I've been doing this almost 30 years now, and while I'm not an excellent historian, but it seems to me that we're having more crises in this country more frequently than we did the previous 20 years, and so you wonder, is there going to be continued, what's the next thing that's going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you mentioned earlier the short-term memories. People tend to think, okay, 9/11 was a terrorist attack. Well, another terrorist attack. Well, I mean, not certainly to that scale, right? In 2008, another debt crisis. Well, that certainly hasn't happened. We've had the inverse. And so have this pandemic, and you could argue we'll have another pandemic, possibly, but likely it's going to be something wildly different that we can't imagine here, And so, one of the things we're going to talk to our clients about at length starting next month is it's maybe not a continuity plan for this type of disaster, but rather just a continuity process, which is different than a plan. Because these continuity plans were rooted originally in fires and floods and natural disasters, and now it's what if the whole internet went down, literally,
Right.
but what happened? And so kind of hard to imagine that happening, but it's also hard to imagine having a pandemic in 2020. Do you think it's a good use of time at this point in time for people to make a real hardcore investment in continuity planning?
I would say absolutely. Of course, I'm going to be looking at it from more of a legal perspective. You're talking about processes, to keep things going. I'm going to talk about authority for people to make decisions, and I'm going to think about not only the business being closed, but then what if something happens to the main players in the business and they can't be there anymore, maybe permanently or temporarily. And I think we found that a lot of our clients don't have that kind of plan either, which would talk a business succession plan, for example. And so one of the things that I did provide Allison, and I know is going to probably be sent to the people that signed up for this later, are some questions to ask themselves. Because I think it's a little bit shocking when you ask some questions about, are you prepared if the primary decision maker in the practice is no longer available? And you didn't have any warning about that. Who is next in line? Who has authority to do things? How will the business keep operating, and who will make those decisions, and what documents are in place or not in place? So I think that I did see a little bit of, from a positive perspective, a little bit of, like an aha moment with the pandemic, that we had some clients thinking we're going to get in and get that estate plan that you've been talking to us about for 3 years done now. And yeah, we do need to talk about our plan for the business. And we need to have those conversations, and we need to know either my professional partner, or if I have one, or my spouse has to know exactly what to do and who to call and where to go next. So that was good, but that was just a handful of people.
Sure. Right.
And we know that the majority of them probably don't have that. And I think many of them would rest easier at night if they did.
Yep.
They wouldn't be as overwhelmed by something like that.
We definitely saw, so that there's that piece of it, but then there's the patient piece of it, right?
Yes.
And the client-facing piece of it. And that's probably one of the biggest things, that there was a notable difference between those that were able to effectively, regularly communicate with their patients and those that couldn't. And they had no mechanics to do it.
Mhm.
And I think if there's any lesson to be learned from a continuity perspective, is, they're your lifeblood, right? And Jimmy, the vast majority of these dentists, they have a very high repeat patient number, right? And so it's a recurring revenue stream for you. And these type of difficult times are when you really need to make sure folks stick with you.
I agree.
Yeah.
And they just, I think when you're in a small business, time and money are your two greatest assets and your two greatest enemies.
Yeah,
right.
right.
And people, we think we're going to live forever.
Yeah.
And we're going to practice forever, and nothing's never going to happen. And when it does, we'll deal with it. And I just, and when I was younger, I thought that way. As I got older, and I've seen others, and certainly living through this, it just makes it a lot better if you have something
right
in place.
Before we take questions, just kind of, because I think it's 10 till, is that right? Okay. Circling back on a big picture, that as a part of where we started with growth with purpose, don't be a victim, be a deliberate owner, that, as a part of thinking about continuity planning, it's also thinking about what you want your legacy to be. And there's plenty of time and opportunity to do that. And again, the world's very accepting of change right now. So I think that this great pause requires a pause to sit down, if you haven't done it already, to work through the things we've been talking about. Does it add anything else at all, and we didn't cover?
No, I mean, well, just kind of on what you said, Randy, it is the time now. It is the perfect opportunity. And I think that also, if you do that, you won't feel the victim. You'll feel that you really got something. I mean, many of us, right now, if we shared stories, we have all gotten something positive out of this.
Sure.
We have made some changes in our own lives that have been positive because of it. And I think from a business and a personal standpoint, and I think that there's no reason to delay. Just go ahead and get that on your to-do list and get that going. And
get it off your to-do list, actually.
Right, that's right. Get it off. That's right. Get it off your to-do list. I guess first it had to be on, and then you got to get it off. Right.
On your schedule and off of your to-do list.
That's right. But I think it is a good time to think about what you do want, where you want your practice to go, and how at the end of the day, when you leave that practice, however that is, what you want to leave behind.
Jim?
Yeah, I think ultimately that's why we all do it.
Mm-hmm.
We become slaves, did it backwards. We become slaves to our businesses instead of the other way around. And I think that the mistake that people make is one person knows everything.
Yeah.
I think, and while it's easier, I think it's better to have a group of people that really understand certain segments of what it is you're trying to do and can advise you. You ought to make the decision yourself. But having those people around, again, while it might be inconvenient, a little more costly, it saves you a lot of money and hassle in the end.
Yeah. Allison, do we have any questions at all?
We do. So once again, please feel free to type questions into the Q&A, and we have the question, with increasing overhead, we have struggled to think of how to make up lost profits. Fellow dentists have been contemplating reducing in-network coverage to gain some more control over cash flow. Many insurance companies are refusing to even allow a PPE charge at all.
So before I answer that, Cindy Sigourney sent that, and Cindy, there's too many words in your question. So
I know
Cindy too.
We all know Cindy.
Yeah. So we should have had a limit for the number of questions or words she can use. But what do you guys take? What do you think about this?
I've had a lot of conversations with people that are thinking about getting out of their arrangements with the PTOs, and I think it's a great time to do it. The issue I have is a lot of times they make the decision ready, shoot, aim.
Yeah.
They don't really look at the data and say, what is this going to do to my business? And it may be good, they just don't know.
Right.
And so they just do it without any thought. So I think it's a great time to talk about it.
You know, one thing that in the question that I think is important to recognize that most businesses had lost profits that are permanently lost. And so, for business owners, sometimes I've talked a lot to people about this. They want to get back to where they were or back on track. And to me, that's a recipe for disaster because you're going to chase revenue and chase things that really aren't core to what you do. And so I think what's more important is to really revisit and retool, what is the core? What are we trying to do? And if you have an off year, that's okay. You come out stronger, better, because time is short when it comes to these type of things. And 2021 is going to be here in a second. And if you have a fantastic 2021 with less stress and you're happier because you retooled your business to be on, and do that, right? And it's the insurance company piece. It's a great time to revisit that, obviously. So, but not in the spirit of lost profits, right? In the spirit of we're going to be a better business because of it.
And the direction you're taking your business in,
right.
Maybe it's a direction that you just don't need those kinds of provider plans anymore.
Right.
They're very restrictive, and I think they're more restrictive than people realize.
Right.
Until they start looking at them.
Yeah, and sometimes with thought, sometimes that's the best course of action. It just depends on what it is you're trying to do.
Yeah.
That's where your brand start to finish, and what are you doing? Who are you doing it for? Who's on your team serving you? Helps make that decision. No is a really important word that could be a good word on the way to better profitability when it's all said and done by saying no, for sure.
Well, and client segmentation, patient segmentation is a huge part of that.
That's right, for sure.
Core values. So we talk a lot with our business owners about core values. For those who don't have defined core values that they can hire to, what recommendations could you give?
There's some books out there such as Traction and Jet Fuel, I think, or Rocket Fuel is the other one, that talk about core values. But I think the lens that we see across the board with all of our clients, not just in dentistry, that, do you have core values that you literally can hire and fire people to, And if the answer is no, you probably don't have the right core values. And so many folks put core values up, think it's a marketing tool, and don't live them. And then that makes it worse because then your employees know that they're just words that don't mean anything. And so I think, again, everything we've been talking about, it's super critical to have core values that not just, for us, be present, be positive, healthy sense of urgency, live and breathe entrepreneurship, a bold pursuit of excellence. And those 4 core values aren't just for our team, it's for our clients too. That we want clients who, and not that they have to be there, but we want them to behave that same way. And I think that for dentists with patients, you want people who respect safety, and respect, be respectful and respect protocols and cleanliness. And so I think core values work across the board. And this is the time to really dig into it. And there's, in my mind, the book Traction is probably the best place to help you understand that. And of course, getting people to help you do it is another piece of it too.
Well, and to Randy's point on that goes down to office manuals reflecting that. Yeah. Every public, everything you put out to the patient and to the employee. And this is a perfect time to start revising office manuals and to do hiring and firing to your core values, and to make sure that they are really reflective of what you want your A team to be like and do. So it's not just words that are they're not just words that are meaningless. And when you do those things, you just mentioned professionals, they need to get their team together, their professional advisors together to help them with all this. This is not something they should just pull off the internet and start doing.
Right. Good question.
So there aren't any other questions at this time. We're going to put up information about how to reach everyone. And so if you have any questions for Cheryl, Randy, or Jim, their contact information is below their pictures. And we thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.